This module provides viewers with a better understanding of the policies, strategies, and new initiatives that play a significant role in dual enrollment and articulation opportunities for students.
Articulation by its very nature means to unite by a joint, and that's what we do when we engage in articulation agreements between a high school and a community college partner. We unite our programs by a joint, and that joint is that course content that creates the bridge from the high school program to the college program. So what is articulation actually? Articulation itself means that there's been an agreement of some kind between two institutions that says that courses are similar in content and rigor in some way. Now, it could be a course, it could be a program, but it indicates that something at the high school, in this case, is similar in content rigor to something at the college. And you can see what it involves there: alignment of course content, sequencing of skills and knowledge, but mostly it encourages and requires, frankly, a relationship between the high school instructor and the college faculty to ensure that that alignment continues and is there. Articulation can occur in two directions. It occurs between community colleges and universities. When a college student takes a course at a community college and their intention is to transfer to a university, the courses that they take at the community college are articulated with the courses that they would have taken at the university. So that articulation exists going that direction. It also exists between high schools and colleges. Typically, this is in career technical education disciplines, but it is not necessary that that be the case. There's a lot of different ways you can do articulation, a lot of different kinds of agreements that you can engage in for articulation. However, they all fall under the articulation descriptor, if you will. There's very specific language about what articulation is and what it can do. So you can see here on the slide that this is the language that governs articulation of high school coursework in Title V. Section 55051 is the portion of Title V that defines what it is and how it should be done. But it also references the previous section, which is 55050, which governs credit by exam. But here in this section, you can read all of the different language that governs articulation. But on the next slide, I'd like to break it down a little bit and explain what this actually means. So you can see here that Title V says that high school and college coursework must be similar in content and rigor. And that is why that relationship is so important, because it really becomes incumbent upon the high school teacher and the college faculty member to get together and look at the course content and determine whether that comparability and similarity is there. Colleges can accept a high school course in lieu of college requirements. Now that's the language in Title V. And they can do that to meet certificate requirements and major course requirements. That in lieu of means that they are they are accepting a high school experience in lieu of a college experience. It does not mean that they're awarding credit for that course. In the case of an in lieu of articulation, that means that a student's college transcript would note that the college course was waived by high school articulation, meaning that the college course didn't need to be taken. It does not mean that the college course will be given a grade. Title V is very clear that credit can only be entered onto the transcript if a student completes an end-of-course assessment. And that end-of-course assessment can be used to award credit on a college transcript for any unit requirement for the associate degree and any general education requirement as well. Now that's something that you don't hear a lot about. That's something that is a little controversial in terms of the way that someone might accept that information on a college campus. So you have some folks on a college campus who might say that you cannot articulate a general education course. That in fact is not true. You can articulate a general education course. However, you must have a credit by exam process in place in order to do so. So you can see here in this breakdown slide that we reference the previous section on credit by examination when it relates to articulation. And what 55050 says is that when you have an articulation agreement and when you expect to get credit on the college transcript for that articulation agreement or for a student completing that high school course, that whatever that end of course assessment is, and it doesn't have to be a test, it can be whatever the college faculty thinks is appropriate, it must measure the mastery of the content in the outline of record. Now, there's a little bit of a contradiction here. So credit by exam, the section of credit by exam says that it has to measure the content in the outline of record. However, it also says that college faculty have discretion in terms of the nature and content of the exam. It is solely the college faculty's responsibility to determine what is in that examination. So the student at the high school, they take the high school course, they complete the high school course. At the end of the high school course, they are subject to some kind of assessment. It could be a written exam, it could be the college final, it could be the high school final, it could be a portfolio of work. It could be, I had a college faculty member that wanted high school students to give them a sample weld. So they would weld two metal coupons together, and he would determine if that weld exhibited mastery of that course outline. So there's tons of ways that you can earn college credit on your transcript through articulation and an end of course assessment. But again, that is up to the college faculty in order to do that. So you can see here that the exam can be given at an off-campus location. The most important thing, and I think the thing that is most critical right now, is the notation on the college transcript. And we see colleges doing this inaccurately all over the place still to this day. It must be noted on the transcript, the college transcript, that credit was earned by examination. It's very clear in Title V, very clear that that's the expectation. And many colleges are still giving a grade and putting in parentheses high school articulation, which is against Title V to do. However, the bigger issue is that when a student takes a high school course, is awarded credit at the college on the college transcript for that articulated course. And that course that they're receiving credit for at the college, let's say for example, is part of a transfer degree program. When there is a transfer degree program course that has been given credit through high school articulation, the receiving university, the CSU, for example, is not obligated to accept that college credit. However, when a course is earned or a grade is earned by examination, they are obligated to accept that credit, because we'll have lots of college students that will take the credit by exam option that we often call challenging an exam in order to test out of, if you will, the course, and their transcripts would also be noted that credit was earned by examination. So it's impossible for the CSU to ascertain whether or not the credit was earned through high school articulation or through credit by exam. And it's not devious to do so. That's very clearly the language in Title V, but it is also very clearly something that our colleges are struggling with doing in an accurate way. So that's definitely something that high school partners want to explore and discuss when they're meeting with their college partner. What is the transcript going to look like when the student completes the course? And I would even go so far as to ask that they see a sample of what that would look like. Because what we don't want to do is work hard to create these connections, to make these agreements, to create these seamless pathways for students, only to learn that when the student got to the college, the course that they got credit for has to be repeated because of a technicality of the way that it was noted on the transcript. So those are some really key points. Certainly you can go back to the language in Title V regarding high school articulation and look at some of the fine detail. And I will tell you that in many cases, a college partner and a high school partner might look at this language and have different interpretations. And so it's really important that folks are on the same page as it relates to this language and what we can and cannot do with regard to high school articulation per Title V. So there's also some changes to Title V that are in the pipeline. This is not a done deal at this point, so just be mindful of the fact there is some movement in this language, mostly in an attempt to clarify some really historically confusing language. As I just said, oftentimes high school and college partners will look at these words and they'll interpret them completely differently. And so that's been problematic for many partners across the state. And so what this change has attempted to do is to separate out the language in articulation from the language in credit by exam. And it attempts to allow 55051 to really stand alone in terms of how we do articulation agreements, how we articulate high school coursework. So that's the attempt. It's also an attempt to address some problems that have existed, and you can see them here with the way credit is awarded, as I indicated before, pass, no pass options, and the practices for credit by examination. This was a collaborative effort between statewide leads in K-14 pathways through SB 1070 and the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. So there is language out there that is kind of in the pipeline for approval and for change in Title V, but that is a lengthy process. And so if you have questions about that, certainly seek out your K-14 pathways lead in your region. Those folks are working through the Doing What Matters for Jobs in the Economy initiative. They are a great resource for you to discover more about what's happening in that area. So let's talk a little bit about benefits of articulation. I think many of us are not going to be surprised by much of this list. But you can see, of course, first and foremost, it eliminates coursework duplication. So if a student at a high school is enrolled in a course that is similar in content and rigor to a college course, then by taking that college course when they get to college, that would be duplicative. And we're trying to eliminate that. This is an efficiency measure to allow for students to capitalize upon the experiences that they've had in high school in order that they can complete their college coursework, be a degree completer, a certificate completer in community college, and or be more quickly able to transfer to university. It provides an added incentive for students to continue their education. Once students have units on a transcript at the college, they are much more likely to matriculate to that college. They are much more likely to continue their education into post-secondary because they know they already have a transcript. And in many cases, in most cases, we encourage high school and college partners when drafting articulation agreements to put a provision in that agreement that students may opt out of the college credit so that, as an example, if a high school student is enrolled in, let's say, an anatomy and physiology class at the high school, and that course is articulated to the community college, and this student wants to be a nursing major, if they get a B in the anatomy and phys class on the articulation agreement end of course assessment, they may not want to accept that B on their college transcript because they would want to go for an A to give them some greater flexibility for nursing program placement moving forward. So it allows them to make those choices and allows them to continue their education by providing those opportunities. So you can see here, of course, easier transition to community college settings. Once a student has articulation credit or college credit on their transcript, it's going to make for an easier transition. And many of our colleges have provisions in place that allow for higher priority enrollment for students that have a certain number of units on their transcripts already. It encourages students to stay in that sequenced program of study. If the work is done correctly, the high school and the college partner are getting together and they're discussing that sequence of courses. And so when students are involved in that sequence of courses, they should or they could know the high school and college instructor connection and be able to make a connection to that college faculty member when they transition into the college part of that sequence. They see themselves in college, they start a transcript, and we all know how beneficial that is for students. But what we don't think about, besides the savings to students, is the savings to California, the savings to us, the taxpayers. Because when a high school student takes a course at the high school and receives college credit on the transcript, and as a result doesn't take that course at the community college, if it's a 3-unit course, that saves the taxpayers of our state $1,400, right around $1,400. And these numbers will change as the numbers and our financial support of our higher ed institutions changes. These numbers will change. But this gives you an idea. Likewise, if a student takes a course at the high school, gets credit at the college, community college, and then leaves the high school and goes straight to the UC, that prevents them from having to take that course at the UC. It saves the taxpayers $5,600, right around $5,600. So you can see how this just isn't a savings for the student and the families, but also for all of us. So again, it's another efficiency measure that eliminates course duplication for the taxpayers, for the students, for the families, and a time-saving measure to get these students out, working and contributing to our economy. So there's some benefits to articulation for our high school teachers. One of the benefits for our high school teachers is that there is no minimum qualification required for them to teach a high school articulated course. Remember, they're teaching a high school course. They're not teaching a college course. However, at the end of their high school course, because it's similar to the college, they are able to get college credit. It's a very distinct difference between this and from concurrent enrollment. Another benefit is that the high school teacher has to have a strong relationship to the college faculty and their college program. In order to ensure that that course sequence is appropriate, there's ongoing conversation that needs to exist between the high school and the college faculty member. And that's really when we see these 9 through 16 pathways being at their best, is when the college faculty and high school teacher really understand each other's programs and are able to discuss the course sequence and accept each other's students. And then I think it really involves ownership of the college CTE programs. When a high school teacher is articulating a course that's part of a college program, they really feel like they're part of the success of that CTE program. They feel ownership of that college program. And again, we're all in this together. We all want to see these students move across this CTE pipeline in order to be completers of degrees and certificates and employed in our communities successfully and happily, frankly. For college faculty, though, it actually allows college faculty to have some sort of influence on what's happening in the 9-12 pathways in their disciplines. Oftentimes, our college faculty will comment that students are not prepared for their coursework. Allowing high school and college faculty to work together on articulation agreements really allows for college faculty to have some impact on the way that students are prepared and the kinds of things that students will be able to do when they come to their coursework and into their program at the college. College faculty also can have some impact on the kinds of things, the kinds of courses that students are taking at the high school. When we talk to high school teachers, oftentimes if they're creating their high school pathway or academy, and they're doing so without the input of a college faculty member, they may not have an idea of what they're preparing students to do or preparing students to go to somewhere. When you bring the college faculty and their program into the picture, now it becomes clear for high school teachers to say, I want to begin with the end in mind. I want to prepare my students to enter the college program. So I really want to look at my course sequencing and the content that I'm giving students so that they can really be ready to go into this college program. If a high school teacher is teaching a pathway or academy that doesn't have a local program aligned to it, it begs the question, what is the value of this high school program for my students if they want to move on? And is there something that I can do to affect the students in my program and allow them to be more ready, more prepared, more aligned with what the college is seeking for their programs? So you can see, of course, college CTE programs should be strengthened by work and skill-ready students as a result of this articulation and this work together. That's not to say that that doesn't occur in dual and concurrent enrollment. However, it is a benefit of articulation as well. Students who enter college with articulated coursework are more likely to complete a certificate program. They're more likely to persist into continuing education. And the reality is that one of the reasons that we still look at articulation is because sometimes dual enrollment just doesn't work, concurrent enrollment just doesn't work. And we still have to find ways to make those connections to students. Because remember, when it comes to dual and concurrent enrollment, the college course and the high school course have to be the same course. So if we don't have similarity in coursework, how can we still connect? There's a lot of flexibility to do that in articulation. As an example, perhaps a high school academy of engineering is offering the Project Lead the Way coursework. It's a great program, it's a great curriculum at the high school, but the engineering program at the local community college does not have a course that is similar to that coursework. Perhaps it would be an option that our high school program, our 4-year sequence of courses at the high school, might allow the students to meet one course at the community college that would be similar. So in that situation, we would be articulating a program to a course, meaning that students who complete a 4-year sequence at the high school are given college credit for a single course to get them started in the college program at the community college. So there's a lot of flexibility to do that. And again, it all boils down to the agreement. There's a lot of problems that exist with articulation, and it's sometimes tricky to navigate those problems. Sometimes community colleges don't have the CTE program that high schools want to articulate to. And so then it requires high schools to really kind of get creative and look at what are some things that make sense for our students to articulate, or what are the skills and abilities that they are gathering from this program, this sequence, this pathway or academy that might be equatable to college credit at the community college. Secondly, a lack of understanding on articulation practices. Oftentimes, colleges feel that because it hasn't worked in the past that it doesn't work at all, and that's truly not the case. Oftentimes, it's just a matter of understanding what a college can and cannot do with regard to articulation, and always keeping students at the center. Always keeping students in mind when we make these agreements, and having an understanding of what the effect on the student would be should this articulation occur or not occur. Sometimes the relationships between the faculty at the college and the high school instructors are difficult to navigate. And again, because this is so focused on course content, there has to be conversation between these two folks. If they don't have a relationship, or if those relationships are strained, it could be problematic to make these agreements work. And so it's very important that instructors at the high school who want to engage in either articulation or concurrent and dual enrollment, that they understand they have to have a relationship with the college instructor in order to make it the best it can be. But one of the biggest challenges really is the awarding of credit, because oftentimes what will happen is our high school students are enrolled in high school courses, and we have difficulty getting the information on those students and their student success in that course. We have difficulty getting that information over to the college and getting that information into the student management system and getting it onto their transcript. So that's been the biggest challenge that I've seen for articulation agreements and articulation and credit by exam, is how we get that credit onto the college transcript. It becomes very, very difficult. And in some cases, it becomes very time consuming and very labor intensive. So that's definitely something that colleges need to figure out if they're going to pursue an articulation agenda and try and articulate high school coursework with the community college. And there's a lot of different ways to tackle that problem. You know, certainly a lot of our high school and college partners are using CATMA, which is a wonderful database portal that high school and colleges can access in order to transfer data between. That's a wonderful option. Some of our colleges are using some different filing systems on Google Drive to try and help that to happen. The reality is, though, there is no best one way to do it. It's a matter of what each college can pull together in order to make it happen. But in any case, in all cases, when the high school students understand that they are enrolled in a high school course that gets college credit, and when they understand that they take an end of course assessment and how they did on that assessment, they can go to the college and say, I completed this course, I completed the assessment, and now I'm ready to get my credit on the transcript. They can be the architects of that as well. And that's why it's challenging, but that's also why it's kind of exciting for students, because they have some ownership on that process. So typically the process begins with the high school contacting the community college coordinator. And so we're seeing a lot of different kinds of coordinators in California now. Oftentimes they're called transitions coordinators. Sometimes it's the college articulation officer that is facilitating these relationships between high schools and community colleges, and sometimes it's not. It just kind of depends on how the college is structured. But it typically is initiated by the high school teacher who contacts the community college and says, I would really like to articulate this course. and then some kind of meeting is arranged between the high school and the college faculty. I would be nervous to engage in any conversation with the college where the faculty was not involved. I would want to make sure, as the high school teacher, that the college faculty know this is happening, and just to ensure that I am teaching what the college faculty hopes that I would be teaching, I want to ensure that the college faculty is involved. And that meeting is really going to talk about three things. It's going to look at the course outline and it's going to say, what is similar here? Where's the rigor? How are we doing things alike? And where do we have commonality? It's going to look at student outcomes and competencies and look at the expectations for student learning and if there's similarity there. And it has to look at the examination or assessment. Now, that's not typically something that's on a course outline. It's not typically something that you would talk about or you would put on a course outline when you're putting together an articulation agreement, but it has to be discussed in this meeting or in subsequent meetings to ensure that everyone's on the same page. Because the worst thing that you would do is that you have this conversation, you develop an articulation agreement, and then when it comes time for the students to take the credit by examination, they don't know what they're supposed to do, and they have no idea how to prepare for the test. We're just setting them up to fail in that situation. So it's very important that the high school and the college faculty member, that they discuss it, they are all on the same page. Ideally, the college faculty could give the high school teacher some form of study guide to help prepare their students for what that expectation is, but definitely a conversation between the high school and the college teachers of that content to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Typically, the coordinator would draft an agreement and then it routes for signatures, and there's a lot of different people that sign those agreements, from the teacher all the way up to the vice president of instruction and beyond. So that typically is what that process looks like. And it usually is reviewed every 2 years, oftentimes annually, at least partially reviewed annually, to ensure that stays the same. Because the relationship between the high school and the college teacher is so important, it is really advisable that if there is an agreement and in the middle of a 2-year agreement, one of the teachers leaves, goes on to a different opportunity, is not teaching that course anymore, that those folks come back together and just confirm, yes, we still agree to this. We still feel like this is an accurate agreement that represents the college coursework and the high school coursework. So what are some things that are going well? So across the state, lots of folks have engaged in different activities to try and better facilitate articulation and articulation agreements. And so you can see some of the things that are really working well in our state. Counselors, teachers, and instructors from both high school and community college get together a couple of times a year and they talk about the course content, they share textbooks, they really establish a relationship so that they have an understanding of what's happening. Some of those folks are visiting each other's classrooms, they're spending a day with each other and looking at student work. Really rigorous and robust partnerships are what we're calling for here in order for this to work well. Some of our high school and community college partners have joint advisory committee meetings, or they have joint advisory committees where their advisory committees meet and they discuss both the high school and the college program. So that's a situation where the sequencing of that pathway from 9 to 16 is really precise and accurate because everyone is hearing the same thing. Everyone's on the same page. Business and industry support, we're seeing a huge influx of work-based learning in our high school pathways, and business and industry are getting involved in 9-12 and 13 through 16 at our CTE programs. And so many of our industry partners are involved in both the high school and the college pathway. Reviewing older articulation agreements and looking at CTE programming, making sure those things are accurate. We talked about high school and college sitting on each other's advisory committees. That's a wonderful, wonderful way to ensure that everyone knows what page everyone is on. If those advisory committees are talking about curriculum, if the high school advisory committee is not addressing the course sequence in detail and having a conversation about that, then we can't expect the college faculty to have an understanding about what's being taught in that pathway. And then, of course, I mentioned as well, solid data tracking systems. Some kind of homegrown system that people are using, or CATMA, or whatever that process is. a data tracking system that will allow you to see student level data. So a college can go in and look at the success rate of a student in a high school course articulated with a college course. Something that allows both partners to look at student level data. That's really what has worked well, so that we know, does articulation work? And I would say there's a lot of room to grow here, that we still don't have a great tracking system across the state to identify students that have been in articulated courses and where they have gone. Where do they end up? Do we know? Some schools do, some schools don't. That's definitely some place that we can improve our practice to identify what happens to these articulated students, and are they moving into the pathways at their local community college as a result of that really precise course sequence. So that's articulation and what has worked well, and some different points of interest with regard to articulation. It's really the nuts and bolts of what articulation means and how articulation happens. Just like articulation, concurrent enrollment is really an opportunity for programs to exist side by side. Concurrent, by its very definition, you can see, is acting in conjunction, cooperating, according, agreeing, and intersecting at the same point. And that's really the benefit, or the goal rather, of concurrent enrollment, is to allow our high school students to access the college simultaneously or side by side to their high school program. And one of the difficulties of concurrent enrollment, probably the greatest difficulty of concurrent enrollment, is that there's no great definition for concurrent enrollment. And there's no great separation from concurrent enrollment to dual enrollment. In fact, all college enrollment by a high school student is considered concurrent enrollment, which is why it's confusing for everybody, because what one college calls concurrent enrollment, another college might call dual enrollment. So no wonder everyone's so confused. So let's try and eliminate some of the element of confusion on this topic. Simply put, concurrent enrollment is a currently enrolled high school student taking a college course for college credit. That is the most simple definition of concurrent enrollment. There's a lot of different models for concurrent enrollment, and as I said, there's no formal definition really to differentiate, except for as it relates to new AB 288 CCAP agreements. So you can see here there's 3 different models for concurrent enrollment. The early middle college option is usually where high school students are taking college courses on the college campus as an integrated high school program. So they are enrolled in their high school courses as well as college courses at the same time, because that's how their high school was built. So some are early college, some are middle college. If you want to know more about middle college programs, there are identified middle college programs through the Middle College Initiative, and you can get more information on that online by searching California Middle Colleges. And you can see the list of true middle colleges by virtue of the initiative, and you can get some information about what really differentiates them in terms of that college, that early college model. Concurrent enrollment means students are enrolled in a college course at any point in the day. Now, when I share these definitions, it's important to understand that this is just to differentiate them for the purposes of this information for you today. Just because this presentation says that this is what concurrent enrollment is, that doesn't mean that your local community college partner would define it the same way. Again, there is an element of confusion with this language here, because there is no formal definition that differentiates concurrent from dual. So for our purposes today, we're going to say that concurrent enrollment is when a student takes a college course at any point in the day, and only the college course. They're not enrolled in a high school course as well as a college course. Dual enrollment, conversely then, would be that students are enrolled in a high school course and a college course in the same content area. So as an example, a student is enrolled in a high school agriculture, business, and government course as a senior in high school. At the same time, they're enrolled in the college ag economics course during that same block of time with the same teacher. So that course is dually enrolled. The student is getting high school credit for the high school component and college credit for the college component. You can see why it's so confusing. So even under that definition of dual enrollment then, we can further specify that dual enrollment courses can be CCAP, which is through the new AB 288 legislation, or they can be non-CCAP. And that makes a difference for us. We need to know what the course is if it's CCAP or non-CCAP, because that changes the way we do things. It changes the way we report. It changes the way we structure that course. It changes the kinds of students that can enroll in that course. So there are some differences there. The benefit to CCAP, among other things, is that we know what that is. It's clearly defined for us. We know exactly what it means. There's some gray area and some wiggle room for non-CCAP that oftentimes makes it challenging for our colleges to navigate. So why concurrent enrollment? We hear this all the time. Oftentimes, college faculty in particular will say, well, gosh, why do our high school partners want our high school students to take college courses? Why can't they just wait until they get to the college and then take college courses? Well, the reality is that you can see here this one research slide that shows the Community College Research Center in 2012 published a study based on student enrollment in Florida, who has a very aggressive concurrent and dual enrollment legislative language and structure in that state, that if you look at the percentage of students who enroll in post-secondary after high school, those students that have dual enrollment in their past are 67% of those students enroll in post-secondary and 50% for those that did not have dual enrollment. So you can see there's a pretty drastic difference between the students that do enroll in post-secondary and the students that don't. And you can see also that for those students that have dual enrollment in their past, that they have completed a dual enrollment course while in high school, their persistence to the second term, they enter college and they go into the second term, 82% of those students will persist into the second term versus 77% of those students who did not take a dual enrollment course in high school. And again, you can look at the data on persistence to the second year. So you can see just in the research in Florida, which has a wealth of data there for dual enrollment, there is a statistical advantage for our students to take a dual enrollment course while in high school over those students that have not taken a dual enrollment course. You can also see that there is a significant GPA advantage for students that have completed a dual enrollment course. The average first-year GPA of a dually enrolled high school student once they enter college is 2.62 versus 2.40 of a student that has not completed a high school dual enrollment course. And you can see again the cumulative GPA is higher, but also you can see that after 3 years in higher education, our students that have dual enrolled coursework in high school complete 55.7 units of post-secondary credit at the end of 3 years as compared to 40 credits for those students that did not have a dual enrollment course while in high school. So you can see the numbers here. Certainly in California, we are just on the cusp of being able to report this kind of data. Our data is just very early coming out because dual enrollment is not as pervasive here in California as it is in Florida. But I would wager that within 3 or 4 years, we'll have statistics like this for our California students that have been allowed to take dual enrollment coursework in high school. So you can see the advantage here. For more information on this study, there's a whole bunch more information regarding data from the Florida study and other studies. You can look at the Community College Research Center report from 2012. If you Google that, you can find it. We do have some data on dual enrollment here in California. We think it may improve career pathway student outcomes. You can see that for students, and this is based again on California data, students have a higher post-secondary enrollment and a higher pursuance of bachelor's degree and second-year persistence. So the numbers, they're early numbers. There's not a large population of California students that have dual enrollment coursework during the life of this study. However, as I said, we are definitely going to be seeing more information come out regarding what that looks like for students and how students progress. We have no reason to think that it would be any different than the numbers from Ohio or Florida, Kansas, any of the other areas in our country that have very aggressive dual enrollment strategies and policies in place. So there's a couple of different pieces of existing law and regs that govern dual enrollment and what that means. Now, I'm not going to dive deep into the Ed Code language, but it's good to know where that Ed Code language is and what it says. There's 2 sections of Ed Code that govern dual enrollment. The portion of Ed Code that talks about K-12, you can see sections 48,800 through 48,814, and those pieces of language that govern community colleges are 76,001 through 76,002. Now, when we speak about existing law regulating dual enrollment, we are really talking about concurrent enrollment. We're really talking about existing law as it relates to concurrent enrollment, because existing law outside of new legislation for AB 288 does not differentiate between concurrent and dual enrollment. So generally, in Ed Code, the purpose of concurrent enrollment are these 3 identified here on this slide: advancing scholastic or vocational work for a high school student, allowing a high school student to enrich their education, and a smoother transition from high school to college. That really was the impetus behind creating these opportunities for concurrent enrollment for high school students. In order for a student to be enrolled in a college course, there is language that requires that students have to receive a recommendation from the principal and parental consent. And oftentimes we'll see this, the college will have some kind of counselor permission form where they will identify the course, the parent will sign off, the counselor will sign off, and the principal will sign off. And it will identify what that student is allowed to enroll in at the college. So the form doesn't allow the student to get carte blanche. It allows the student to enroll in the courses listed on that form typically. Oftentimes, the student is allowed to use that college course for college and high school credit. And what that means is, if a high school student, let's say for example, a high school student is enrolled in a high school that only requires 3 years of college math, high school math. That student takes the 3-year sequence of courses in math, but wants to continue their math education. And in lieu of taking other math courses that are available at the high school, they might choose to start their college math sequence. They take the placement test, they place into college level math, they enroll in a college math course. Once that student completes the college math course, and it's not dual enrollment, they're just going to take the course on their own as a college student starting college early, they can bring their college transcript back to the high school, and the high school may allow, some do, some don't, may allow the student to receive credit for a senior level math class, in this scenario, for the course that they completed at the college. So it's not that they took the high school course, rather is that the high school is going to accept the college course and award credit in lieu of them enrolling in the high school course. So that's kind of a dual credit option where they take the college course and then they come back and get credit at the high school for doing so. And there's a variety of reasons why you would want to do that. Certainly it shows a high school student's interest in accelerating and advancing their scholastic work. And we want to make sure that when a student is applying for colleges and universities, that the universities are able to see their interest in acceleration and advancement on that high school transcript. So another provision in existing law is that high school receives ADA for student attendance. In other words, a high school student cannot take a college course if they haven't completed their daily hours at the high school. So they can't come to school for a 55-minute period and then take the rest of the day and go to college. They have to complete their required minutes at the high school as prescribed by law, and the high school, of course, is going to enforce that because they want to receive their average daily attendance funds for that student's attendance. There's a limit also on summer session. Students have to be prepared for any summer session coursework, and so as a result of that, oftentimes they will limit the kinds of enrollments that students can take over the summer. It's also really difficult for students to get college coursework in the summer session as well, because there are just a whole bunch of students, college students, that are trying to take that college coursework already as it is. And students have to exhaust all of their opportunities for the equivalent course at the high school. Now here's an example of that. We have a student in a local high school who is very, very talented and gifted in mathematics. This student started high school as a freshman in Algebra 2. He took every single high school course in mathematics that he could take in progressively and increasing rigor and more challenging content, by the time he had finished his sophomore year, he had taken it all. He couldn't take anything else. So in order for him to continue his math sequence, he went to the community college and he began taking his community college math sequence at the college. What the high school did, because again, remember, this student needed to complete 3 years of math in order to graduate from high school. What the high school did is they allowed the college transcript to complete the graduation requirement for that student on his transcript. So this particular student in this scenario might have a college transcript that would have high school course names on them, but he may have actually completed a couple of those courses at the community college. So that's a limit on summer session. So if a student has taken every course that they can possibly take in that content at the high school, then they would be able to take the college course. Now again, I just want to reiterate that we are talking about existing law. So this is not relevant to AB 288, new legislation. Rather, it's the way that dual and concurrent enrollment have been done now for some time. Typically, students are admitted as a special part-time student. They'll call them a special part-time admit. It is a way to identify students in our community college information systems. The college can receive state apportionment on these students. So there's a variety of different things in play here. If a high school student goes to high school through their high school day, they complete all of their coursework, their 240 minutes, and then they take a college course, then the college can receive apportionment on that student. But it's something to consider, however, is colleges and high schools don't receive funding in the same way. So it's important to note that community colleges can receive state apportionment on high school students enrolled in their coursework under existing law when they're admitted as a special part-time student, when they have completed their 240 minutes of K-12 instruction per existing law. But it's important to note, though, that colleges and K-12 partners are funded differently for student attendance. In the case of the K-12 partner, districts are funded based on their average daily attendance. They need to reach that 240 minutes in order for them to consider attending for that day. Conversely, when we look at community colleges, they don't look at average daily attendance. Rather, they look at full-time equivalent students. A full-time equivalent student is a 12 units of enrollment. So if you have one high school student enrolled in a 3-unit course, you would need 4 of those high school students to equal one full-time equivalent student. And not only that, colleges are funded based on a range of full-time equivalent students. So for example, a college might receive a certain number of dollars for 10,000 full-time equivalent students. And they wouldn't receive increased funding until they hit, let's say, 13,000 full-time equivalent students. So in the space between 10,000 full-time equivalent and 13,000 full-time equivalent students, the college would be receiving no additional funding, but would be providing additional service as a result of the additional students that they serve. So it really becomes an enrollment game to try and figure out, how do we hover around the level of enrollment of full-time equivalent students at the college in order to take the best advantage of the apportionment that we are given? So it's not like, scratch that. You can't really say, no, scratch that. It's not like the K-12 districts where you can say, well, gosh, college, you're getting an extra student, you'll receive apportionment for that student. That's not the case. It takes 4 of these 3-unit students in order to make a full-time equivalent. And even then, they wouldn't receive extra funding necessarily on that student. It's important to understand those differences, because when we're engaging in these relationships and these conversations between our high school and community college partners, it's important to understand what each other values and why each other is at the table in order to make these things work. So under existing law, college and K-12 districts can determine the level of course credit and what that looks like. What kinds of courses would be appropriate for high school students to take. Students are assigned low enrollment priority except those that are identified as middle college students. That's an exception in existing law based on the Middle College Initiative. So as we talk about students that might want to take a summer session course, or students that want to take an impacted course or a high demand course like an English course or a math course or a history course, it's going to be difficult perhaps for them to take that course at some colleges because they will have a low enrollment priority and they may have to try and crash the class in order to get in that course, which is a great lesson in grit and being a savvy student and learning how to navigate that process. But as we all know, not all high school students are able to navigate that process. Many of them lack the grit necessary to do so. So it's really important to understand that just because a student decides they want to take a college course doesn't mean they're going to get the course that they want. Community college classes have to be open and advertised to the general public 30 days prior to the course. What that means is if a college wants to enter in an agreement with a high school to offer a course on the high school campus, a concurrent or dual enrolled course, and the high school wants their high school students to take that course, it cannot be limited to only high school enrollments. That class has to be open and advertised for 30 days, such that any college student that wanted to could enroll in that class. That also means that high school students may not be able to get the course if college students that have higher priority enroll in it prior to the student's enrollment priority coming up. So it's a balancing act. It's trying to figure out when do we open that course, how do we advertise it. Now, in the case of a dual enrollment course where the college is offering a course on the high school campus and perhaps the high school teacher is teaching as adjunct faculty for that course, perhaps that course is meeting 5 days a week for an hour according to the high school schedule. Many college students would not choose to take a course 5 days a week for an hour on a high school campus. That simply would not be their preference. So by virtue of that, that limits a little bit of the enrollment that you might get from a general college course. However, there is that potential. Another thing to be cognizant of for a dual enrollment course on a high school campus is that they can be held on a high school campus, but they cannot be held when the campus is closed to the public. That's typically about 1:30 after lunch. Each campus has each district rather, has a time that they identify that the campus is closed to the public. But oftentimes you'll see high schools that are changing their schedules to allow students to come and go for their high school day, particularly now because dual enrollment has become such a hot topic and such an in-demand strategy for our high schools that they are really looking at how they open and close their campus in order to allow students to engage in education outside of the high school setting. There is a limit on enrollment of high school students into PE courses, and the college can only claim 5% of that total FTEs for apportionment. So there are some exceptions to in existing law that we have to be privy to. Certainly, the colleges understand this. Now, it's important to note that it does not matter what this slide says. It does not matter what I say, you say, the law says, etc. When a high school partner goes to meet with a college partner, the college process is what the high school partner follows. It's the college's responsibility to design their dual and concurrent enrollment programs in accordance with this existing law and any subsequent laws that may come to play. So when a high school partner goes to meet with a college partner, and maybe the college partner says something in their protocol that is in contradiction to something on this slide, it doesn't really behoove the high school partner to say, well, according to existing law, community college, you have to do X, Y, Z. The college has spent a lot of time and energy in designing their concurrent and dual enrollment programs in accordance here, and it really is just about the high school working with the college to do what's right for students. The purpose of this presentation is not to change what is happening in community college. Rather, it is to inform the high school partners on what the conditions are that the colleges are dealing with when they're trying to design these programs. Because it's not easy. It is challenging. You can see just in this slide alone, you can see some of the challenges that colleges are placed with when they try and design some kind of dual and concurrent enrollment opportunity on our high school campuses. So it is tricky, and it requires some innovation and creative thought for our college partners to make this work. Now, this doesn't even address the fact that when a community college is offering a college course on a high school campus, particularly in a dual enrollment setting, that course has to meet the hours requirement for that college course. As an example, if a college or if a high school requests, let's say, some kind of lab course where the college course is a 3-hour lecture and a 3-hour lab, that's 6 hours a week. The high school has to figure out how are they going to fit that in their schedule. If they're meeting 55 minutes a day for 5 days, that's not going to work. So the high school is going to have to get creative for how do we fit that in our schedule as it exists today in order to meet that hours requirement. We can't say, gosh, college, just knock an hour off a week. We can't do that. We have to meet the requirements of the course outline of record from the community college in order to make it work. So there's definitely some give and take in existing law and in new legislation that's going to have to take place in order for these agreements to come to play. Just like articulation, dual and concurrent enrollment requires a very strong and robust relationship between high school and college partners, particularly between those partners that are teaching that discipline. So a high school teacher that's teaching that discipline really has to have an understanding of what the expectation is from them on the college side as it relates to their professional behaviors and responsibilities, attendance, etc., but also the expectation of the college faculty as it relates to the course content. The college faculty really it's incumbent upon them to communicate to the high school instructor, this is what I expect of your students in this course. Because the reality is, many of these courses are introductory courses for high school students. So if we aren't providing them what they need in order to persist in this sequence of courses at the college, then we're doing them a disservice, because then they will have gaps in their knowledge as they persist into the next course in the sequence, which will then be problematic for the college faculty. So again, lots of communication between high school and college instructors, lots of understanding regarding expectations for high school achievement and success. AB 288 legislation recently passed, which provided opportunities for college and career access pathways. We call them 288 pathways, we call them CCAP as well. They are different from existing law dual enrollment opportunities. And there's a couple of different ways that they are. Dual enrollment under CCAP language or under AB 288 language requires a district level agreement. So it changes the way that we design these college courses. The intention is to reach a broader range of students. Remember that I discussed in the previous slide that there were 3 intentions behind existing law for dual enrollment: educational enrichment, advanced scholastic work, and smoother transition to college. This legislation intends to reach those students that might not typically access college otherwise. So it's not just about acceleration and enrichment, it's about getting students to college that might have a problem doing so. It's about equity. It's about allowing students access to college and career through a pathway. The emphasis here is on college and career readiness, it's on CTE and transfer, and it's really about informing and filling up this pipeline for our career pathways for students. And it hopes to reduce the number of students that need remedial help in English and math upon entrance into the community college, mostly because it allows colleges to offer English and math coursework in the high school and allows them to track success, or lack thereof, of students in those courseworks to identify the need for remediation, allows the colleges to look at their practices for assessment and placement and dual and concurrent enrollment in these areas to gather data on it and make some decisions about how they provide services to high schools in their region. There is some flexibility in our CCAP agreements that we don't have in existing law for dual and concurrent enrollment. CCAP allows a limit on enrollment to only high school students. So when a course is being taught on the high school campus and it's a college course, through a CCAP agreement, meaning if that course is designed and approved through the CCAP agreement process, that course can be limited to only high school students. It also allows high school students to take 15 units a term or a semester, if that's the case, and no more than 4 courses. Now you might say, gosh, 15 units, that's a lot of college coursework. How are they going to do that? Well, where a student is enrolled in an early college model, they can do that easily because they're enrolled in dual enrollment coursework throughout the course of their early college high school schedule. And it also provides CCAP students a higher enrollment priority and the same priority as a middle college student. This is a biggie. This is a big one because it really allows our high school students that are enrolling in these courses a fighting chance to get the courses that they really need. So those are three biggies, real big changes, and really what differentiates a CCAP dual enrollment agreement from a dual enrollment agreement in previous and existing law. Under CCAP agreements, a district must agree and review and approve the agreements in 2 board meetings with both districts. So you can see how there's a time factor at play. This isn't something that we discuss today and the course is on the schedule tomorrow. It's going to take some time to get in front of both of those school boards. They have to comply with all existing state and federal reporting requirements and collective bargaining agreements. This also is something that has been challenging in the past because let's say, for example, that a college wants to offer CCAP agreement dual enrollment courses at every one of their high schools in their service area. And as part of their collective bargaining agreement, the head college faculty member in that division for that discipline has to evaluate all new college faculty, which a high school teacher would be when they teach this course. They have to go and evaluate all of these faculty members twice a year. And there's 25 schools in the service area. That would mean that that college faculty member has to go out and evaluate 50 times in a year all of these, or twice each, all of these new college faculty members, which would be 50 visits out to high schools, in addition to the responsibilities that that faculty member has already in place for any faculty that exist on the campus. So you can see where there's some negotiation that has to happen with the college and with the high school, and some discussions about what is this really going to look like, and frankly, what is the capacity of the college to do this work. Oftentimes, high schools will say, well, they just don't want to work with us, and that's not the case. What really is the case is that they are trying to figure out how to work with our high school partners while still honoring the agreements for faculty on the campus. CCAP districts have to ensure that faculty aren't displaced and that traditional college courses still have access to what they need. So this is really the statement that identifies the balance between what we have here in terms of our traditional college students and the access that they need, and the faculty that are here and what they are teaching and what we're trying to do for our high schools in our service area. So it's really taking a broad, comprehensive look and looking at the effect that these dual enrollment CCAP agreements would have on the college and the high school, the faculty, the students at the college, and what does that do to students when we make these decisions and schedule these courses. Also, the districts have to report student outcomes in CCAP. So they have to be able to say what happened to a student in a CCAP course. Did they pass? Did they fail? What was their student success? They have to look at how did the students do. And I think this is a wonderful thing because I think in order to identify whether or not this is a strategy that works in our career pathways, we have to be able to look at the data to support. We have to look at the evidence that shows that this strategy works or does not. And we have to be able to use that evidence and data in order to facilitate some kind of continuous improvement moving forward in the career pathway. Just because we're offering a dual enrollment course in a career pathway doesn't mean our students are going to go to college. Now we have to show that it does or it doesn't using evidence. So how can we answer that question if we don't have that evidence in place? How does this change work? So our colleges are now dealing with the question of, what do we do? Do we continue to offer dual enrollment under the existing law that we always have used? Do we offer CCAP agreement dual enrollments, or do we offer both? Both legislation, the existing law and the AB 288 legislation language, they both allow for dual enrollment of high school students in college courses. They're both charged with providing provision for dual enrollment. CCAP is an option. It's not a mandate. Some colleges look at the requirements for CCAP implementation and they say, you know what, we're not going to go there. We're just going to stay with our existing law for dual enrollment. And they can do that. That's completely their choice to do so. Likewise, high school partners might stay the same. They might say, you know what, we don't want to go that route. We'd like to just keep it as is. And that's fine under legislation, under current law. Colleges and their partners can continue to operate under non-CCAP and CCAP. They can enter into new agreements. They can do both. They can offer some coursework under CCAP, other coursework under non-CCAP. So they really have some flexibility to decide what makes the most sense for the career pathway that's in place. And there's a million different scenarios that we could run through that would show a situation that one would be more beneficial than the other. And just to be silly, we could throw articulation in there too, and we could say in all these different scenarios, articulation, CCAP, or non-CCAP all might be a better option than the other. So it's just a matter of, again, that relationship between the high school and the community college, having an understanding about what they want to do and how it affects students, and putting students at the center of any decision that's made, and what that looks like for students at the high school and frankly at the college as well. Because if a college begins to offer dual enrollment opportunities at a high school, while their college program is not succeeding, there is an effect on the college program. And that's something the college wants to be mindful of. They want to preserve the strength, rigor, and importance and value of their college programs. And so they too want to ensure that their college programs are robust and can serve the students that they have in their service area. So we just need to be mindful of that as well. This next slide is not something that we really need to discuss. However, I do want to share that this is a copy of a one-pager that the Dual Enrollment Toolkit has available that really identifies the differences between CCAP and non-CCAP. And you can see that there are many things here that have been discussed already through previous comments in this presentation. You can see some of the notations here on this chart. It's really a great resource for our high school and college partners as they begin to navigate dual and concurrent enrollment with their partners, and looking at some of the things they need to be mindful of in order to really have robust and quality relationships. So I would encourage you to Google Dual Enrollment Toolkit and look at that resource. It's a fantastic resource. There's a one-pager just like this in there that will really be helpful as you begin to navigate this work. I want to talk just briefly about minimum qualifications, because oftentimes there is an assumption that all high school teachers, in order to teach a college course, must have a master's degree. And that really is not the case. So I want to demystify minimum qualifications a little bit, if possible. But before I do so, I want to say first and foremost that minimum qualifications for California community colleges is identified by the Board of Governors. The last one that was approved was in 2014. And this sets forth minimum qualifications. And the operative word here is minimum. This is the minimum that the state will allow in order for a teacher or faculty to teach content at the community college. However, a college may choose to increase the qualifications when hiring faculty. As an example, let's look at some of our minimum qualifications here. So these are some examples pulled from the most recent version of the minimum qualifications document. Now you can see here that ag production as a discipline includes animal science, plant science, beekeeping, and aquaculture. And that minimum qualification is any bachelor's degree and 2 years of professional experience, or any associate degree and 6 years of professional experience. Now you can see here the minimum is there, but a college might say, you know what, we would prefer our faculty in agriculture production to have a master's degree. And so they can set the master's degree as their minimum, regardless of what minimum qualifications say. Now, they cannot set their minimum qualifications at the college below this minimum designation. So that's something to be cognizant of. Now, if you were to look at agriculture, straight agriculture discipline, that does require a master's degree. Now, it's not here on this slide, but if you look at the document, that does require a master's degree. So you can see here under agriculture production how we've identified the specific content areas in parentheses. There is a difference between agriculture production and agriculture as disciplines in this document. So there's 60 or 70 rows on this document that identify the minimum qualifications. I've just pulled 4 here so you could take a look at some of the differences. So you can see here on the next one, English, there's a wide range of master's degrees that are identified here, and a master's is required for English and math. And then of course you can see again graphic arts, the CTE discipline, any bachelor's degree and 2 years of professional experience, or any associate degree and 6 years of experience. And this has really been an area of concern for our community colleges because, especially in our CTE disciplines, there's difficulty in finding faculty that meet minimum quals in these CTE areas, especially in the area of professional experience. And it is sometimes problematic to find someone in industry who has both the educational qualification and the professional qualifications. So oftentimes, we will see the language or the equivalent next to the minimum qualification, which indicates that if someone is coming to teach at the community college or wants to teach at the community college, there is an equivalency process that they must go through in order to do so if they don't meet these minimum qualifications. And what that basically entails is a panel of faculty from the college who review the application packet for this applicant and then determine whether or not their professional experience or their grounds for equivalency, if you will, is appropriate and equivalent to the educational background. So perhaps you have a graphic artist who has been in the industry for 20 years, has presented at a variety of professional conferences and convenings, and we might say that his professional experience is equivalent to an associate degree or a bachelor's degree in graphic arts. That might be an example of something that would be an equivalent experience to the educational minimum qualification. But again, those decisions are made on a community college site-by-site, case-by-case basis. Faculty are involved in that, and that's definitely the purview of the faculty in the discipline to ascertain whether or not that experience or that equivalency is appropriate. You can Google the minimum qualifications for California community colleges and find the most recent document from 2014. And it's definitely something to consider before engaging in a conversation with your local community college on whether or not you might be qualified to teach at the community college in a certain discipline. I want to add that there's some new recent legislation that allows non-resident special part-time students to be exempt from non-resident tuition when they are enrolled in a dual or concurrent enrolled pathway course. So that's something to consider. When the legislation for 288 came through and was approved, this was an omission that they didn't realize at the time, so they real quick turned around and added this language in a subsequent bill, AB 2364, in order that students that are non-resident may still be able to enroll in that college dual enrollment course. So there's lots of obstacles to effective dual enrollment, of course. It's not an easy relationship or agreement to navigate. And the biggest obstacle, one of the biggest obstacles, I guess, would be time. And we've talked and we've shared a lot about the importance of relationships. Relationships don't happen without time. It takes time for high school and college faculty to work together, to understand each other, to share effective instructional practice, and to develop a relationship so that the college faculty feels good about that high school teacher teaching their college content. So that requires time, and that can be tricky to schedule, can be tricky to find the time, But oftentimes it takes a lot of time, and so some of our colleges are providing some financial incentives for college faculty to work together with their high school partners in order to create those dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment options. Sometimes there can be a lack of participation and buy-in from college faculty and high school teachers. Sometimes the dean or some administrator perhaps at the college might want to put these things in place to serve the high school and might not engage the college faculty in the process early enough on. So the college faculty might feel like, hey, I don't know if I want to be part of this. I wasn't brought in early enough. So it's really important that when a high school teacher or a high school district is engaging in these conversations with colleges, that they ensure that the college faculty is at the table to start talking about what this might look like. An understanding of instructional time requirements, and it says K-12 instructional time, but it really should say understanding K-12 and community college instructional time requirements. It is really important that the expectation for instructional time is met by, on the K-12 side as well as the community college side, by the instructor. Again, if a course is expected to meet 6 hours a week and the high school is not able to accommodate that 6-hour schedule, then something's going to have to be done because that has to be met, and an understanding of how that would work. Likewise, an understanding of the community college to understand that K-12, or our high schools rather, might not have the flexibility to have a Tuesday, Thursday, 1 to 4 class for all of the dual enrollment courses. It might be too problematic to try and manage the master schedule to do that, with the understanding that there's 1,800 or 1,900 students on the campus that they have to plug into coursework in that 3-hour block on Tuesday, Thursday. Trying to make that work can be really tricky. It can definitely be an obstacle. But again, each of these obstacles that are identified here really are fixed by creative and innovative thought about putting students first and looking at creative ways to accomplish and kind of defeat these obstacles, if you will. Ensuring success of academically underprepared students. One of the challenges to dual enrollment, I think, is that oftentimes high schools believe, or I don't know that they believe it, but they are under the misconception that if you put a high school student in a college course, they're going to do well, they're going to rise to the challenge, and many do. However, some high school students need some support, and so our high schools really have to look at how can they support the students that are in these dual enrollment courses so that they can be successful. And that doesn't mean that they spoon feed them or they support them in a way that is unrealistic. However, this is a transition. We think about the transition that our high school students make from the 8th grade year to the freshman year. Many of our high school students really struggle in that transition. Likewise, many of our high school students struggle in the transition from high school to community college. If you ask a college faculty member, what's the difference between a high school senior and a community college freshman, they'll tell you 3 months. That's really not a big difference. We really have to help our students navigate that transition. One of the big areas of improvement, I think, for our high school programs, pathways, academies, is when they approach the community college and request some kind of dual enrollment course, it's really beneficial if they approach them with a program of study that shows the integration of that college course content, so that it shows this is my plan for my program of study, and I really want to do this dual enrollment course because it makes sense for my sequence of courses. This is my goal. My goal is to get my students to your college program, and in order to do that in an effective, efficient, and beneficial way for students, this dual enrollment course makes sense. If a high school teacher goes into the college and just comes in and says, I want to teach one of your courses, it's a little difficult to have that conversation with the high school teacher, as compared to if they come in and say, here's my plan for how I'm going to get my students to you. That begins the conversation in a much better way. There sometimes is a belief that dual enrollment isn't for everybody, that it's only the exceptional students that can complete a dual enrollment course. And that's really a misconception and an indicator that perhaps a college has not had experience with a really robust and rigorous dual enrollment program. And my only comment to that would be that we have to show our community college partners that our high school students can do this, and it's not only for those exceptional 1 in 100 students to do. This is a strategy that is changing the outcome for high school students everywhere, and it's not changing the outcome for only 4.0 and above students everywhere. It's changing the outcome for all students everywhere. We see stories and hear stories about students that were disengaged from school, they didn't want to be in school, they didn't like learning, and then they took a dual enrollment course, and all of a sudden their learning had value for them because it was going to get them to their end goal. It's not just for the exceptional. Not every student can do it necessarily, but it's not just for those exceptional students. So we have to really work on changing that mindset to show that our students can do this. And if you ask high school students, they'll tell you that they can. A big obstacle is that there's not enough focus on the partnership between the high school and the community college. I really believe strongly, and my colleagues would agree, that when you're engaging in a dual enrollment agreement, it's very important to focus on the partnership. This dual enrollment is not a silver bullet that's going to change the career pathway. Rather, it is a strategy in a comprehensive program of study that will allow our high school students to align and transition to the community college and allow them to accelerate in a way in their CTE pathways and limit remediation and all those other things that we talked about. We can't mitigate the importance of the partnership between high school teachers and college faculty. Very, very important that they work together. One of the challenges as well is parents. Parents have some concerns about the limited access to student data. So when a high school student is enrolled in a college course, the parent can't call the teacher and say, "Hi, Professor Smith, I'm Johnny's mom. Can you tell me what their grade is?" There's not that level of access for our high school parents. So there's a lot of ways around that. High school students that are enrolled in a college course can fill out a form to allow their students access to their records, or their parents rather, access to their records. Some of our schools will have their students fill out a form that allows the high school counselor access to their college student data to allow for that support to happen. But it is a shift. It's a shift for our students. It's a shift for our parents. And so it's important that we communicate with parents when their students are enrolled in dual enrollment coursework so that they understand the differences. There's lots of obstacles to effective dual enrollment, but I think that we've seen that the data shows that this is a strategy that can impact student progression into post-secondary. It can impact the college-going culture, the college-going rate of students that are currently enrolled in high school. It can really affect students' attitudes towards college. And as we all know, technical skills and knowledge is the new currency in our economy. It is not enough for students to just be educated. They have to have technical skills. And it's not enough for students to just have technical skills and not be educated. Our community college partnerships are critical in order that we can get our students to the next level, that we can get them industry certifications, degrees, and transfer level matriculation. It is through those partnerships, through those agreements, that we can really start to affect student outcomes in our regions. So certainly, there are many of us that could add a list 10 times this size for obstacles. However, what's more important is that we identify the ways to get around those obstacles through creative relationships, partnerships, and understanding each other, understanding the expectation of our partners at the table.